What we're going to be looking at today is creating this squishy animated letter A. This animation is my first post for this year's 36 Days of Type, so look out for all the other artists' submissions on Instagram. This is an effect I've played with before, but I thought you might be interested in how it was created. We'll be using some MoGraph tools and a few deformers applied to our letter, but you could use this technique for a variety of shapes. Let me know in the comments below if there are any other tutorials you'd like to see, and remember to subscribe to get notifications of when I upload new videos. Okay, let's get started. As you could probably tell from the animation, we're pushing out polygons to create our squishy, pillowy shapes. This works best when you have a clean geometry though. So you could start from a MoText object like I've got here, or an extruded spline, but I'll just show you why that can throw up some problems first. So here I've got my MoText object, and I've just applied a letter A, and I'm using the font Big John. I'll put a link in the description below where you can download this font from. I'm going to make the depth a bit wider, say 40. Okay, so it's kind of the same sort of thickness all around, and then I'm going to turn on garage shading with lines just so we can see the polygons. Now what you think you might be able to do is you go to caps, and under here we could change this to like quadrangles and change this to a regular grid, and see we get this nice regular grid here, but it's kind of messy all around the edges. We can try to tidy that up a bit by going back to object. We can change down here, change this to uniform, and see already that's kind of trying to work, but it's not perfect, and we've got lots of these triangles and it's not like really cleanly doing it. We could subdivide here just so we get some depth, but again we've still got these triangles, and I've played around with this and I don't seem to be able to get it to actually line up perfectly. So I think the best way of doing this is actually to create some clean geometry, and we can use this one as guide. Okay, so what I'm going to do first is just go into the front view, and I am going to up the number of intermediate points just so we've got a clean shape to work from. And then the next thing I'm going to do is we're going to get a polygon. I'm going to change the orientation through the +Z, and then I'm going to line that up with the middle of the A. I'm going to make that editable, go to our point selection tool, and then I'm going to line up this shape with the shape of our A. This would probably be obviously easier with objects that have straight edges. With letters like, you know, C or O, you're going to have a bit more trouble. But we've got our basic layout of the A set up there. What I'm going to do is go into polygon mode, select the line cut tool, and then I'm going to cut out the shapes and the polygons that we need to make our A. So I'll click down here. I'm not going to be too precious about exactly where these go. If you hold down shift, this will iterate between different 45-degree angles so you can get a straight line. I'm going to go straight over, click again, and press space to confirm that cut, and I'm going to do that for the rest of the shape. So we want a line across here, probably want a line, actually we'll do these two cuts, so I want to cut up to here. I'm not going to go as low as this, I think I'm going to go a little bit higher so it's kind of a bit more in line with this line, a bit more parallel. So I'm going to cut there to there. Okay, I didn't do that perfectly, so let's just move this tad a little bit. I'll try not to mess this up too much. Okay, I'll probably want a cut between here and here, and then we'll want a couple of cuts up here. I'm going to try and get a decent number of polygons. Oh, that wasn't totally straight. I want to be at least reasonably straight. Get a reasonable number of polygons so we can kind of see our shape. Do a cut here. Then I think I'm going to do a cut basically down the center of the object. Actually, I don't want to mess that up. Let's do one there, one here. Then I think we'll kind of split these up, kind of subdivide. this up to the top, another one up to the top here. Okay, so then I'm going to the polygon mode and display garage shading with lines, and what I'm going to do is we'll delete our Mo text and we're going to select the polygons that we don't need anymore. So let's select this one, these two at the bottom, and there's our A. I just want to make sure this is okay. So we've got a little issue here where I was being a bit sloppy really, so I'm going to just line these two up. I was being a bit too sloppy, so I'm going to make sure I select both of those points, and under here I'm going to optimize, and that should lock those 2 points together. There you go. Okay, so now we've got our clean shape. So now we've got our A. So I'm going to select all polygons. Let's go into our 3D view, and I am going to turn caps on and then extrude this out by 40. Okay, and then I think I'll set a subdivision of 1, so we've got some sort of reasonably equal sized squares around the edges. Okay, so the next thing we'll do is we can actually start animating this. So to do that, we're going to use the MoExtrude. Now, if I bring the MoExtrude and just put it underneath our polygon shape, you see straight away it just pushes out each of those polygons and already is making kind of like those pillows that we had in the final render. If I go to the shading with lines there, you can see we've got too much geometry. So that's these extrusion steps under object. We're just going to set this to 1, and then under transform I'm going to change this to 12, and the scale I'm going to change this to 0.8, and the scale is basically the scale per step. We've only got one step, so we've got this kind of a little bevel, I guess. And then what we're going to do is use the Plain Effector to kind of offset this, to kind of bring it back in, and then a shader to show, to push them out. Okay, so we'll probably do that quickly now. So I'll bring in, we'll get a Plain Effector, and I had MoGraph, MoExtrude selected, so it's already pushed everything up into the air. That's because it's pushing it in the Y direction by 100. Now we're extruding currently by 12 in the Z direction, so the parameter I'm going to change here is -12, so we're just kind of bringing it back in. If I add in a subdivision surface and stick our polygon in there and go to garage shading, I can show you what it's currently looking like. We turn off the Plain Effector, it's kind of looking quite blob. I mean, it's a nice effect in itself, I guess. This is something you could definitely work with, but for the effect that we had in the A for my render, we want to tighten that up. So the way I did that is actually by creating another MoExtrude. This one doesn't need the effector. We're going to just use this one as a bevel just to get some extra geometry in there, just to tighten up the edges basically. I'm going to leave that at 0.8, but for the Z axis we're just going to change that to 0.5. So now we have these much more defined kind of shapes that push out, and if we turn the Plain Effector back on, there you go, you can see where we've got tightening around the edges, and then we've kind of got this looser flap in the middle, which is going to be the bit that pushes out and pulls back in again. Right, and to do that we're going to go into the Plain Effector, and we're going to add a fall off. So the fall off is going to display or show the extrusions. So I'm going to use the under fall off, the shader field, and so like I've done in lots of my animations, like noise driving the animation. So under shader we'll go to noise, and then in here we'll set the animation speed to 1, and I'm going to make this a loop period of let's say 4, and that's probably a good time to actually change my project settings, because currently I'm set to 30 frames per second. I like to work to 25, and we'll make that 4 seconds, so 100 frames. Okay, let's go back to our shader field, and if we press play, nothing's happening. We can see that it's being affected a little bit by the noise, I'm going to actually change the scale of the noise. We'll go up to like 500%. And I'm going to up the contrast. So you can see there what's being pulled in and pushed out. I'm going to change that to about 70. But still, nothing's animating. So the reason for that is if you kind of go up to one more level, so just click on the shader field. At the bottom, in this bottom drop down tab, there's a refresh and this selection frame. Tick that, then it will basically refresh our animation or the noise every frame and update that in the Plain Effector. So if we press play now we're getting our animation. It's quite slow because we've got the subdivision surface turned on, so if we turn that off we can kind of see more what's going on. So we've got that working, but the next thing we want to do is give it that more fluid motion that kind of adds to this and kind of makes the whole thing a little bit more interesting. I use a couple of other effectors to create that with. So I'll just turn our subdivision surface back on, and I'm going to grab a twist deformer. I'm going to stick it underneath our main polygon, which is the A. I'm going to make that an actual A, so I know what I'm talking about. I'm going to fit to parent, then I'll set this to be like a square kind of shape. Actually, I'm going to make this unlimited, so it doesn't necessarily have to be in the box to be affected. I'm going to change the angle on this to something like 20 degrees. You see there we've got that little twist in it. I'm going to bring this back up out of the subdivision surface, and then I'm going to group all that together because the twist affects anything else in the folder with it. So with the twist selected, I'm going to go to frame 1. I'm going to set a keyframe. I'm going to go to frame 100 and set a keyframe. And here I'm going to actually just rotate this through 360 degrees. Make sure that's saved. I'll turn off the subdivision. So there you go. So now we've got that kind of initial, like, flowing, more natural kind of animation on top of our little kind of pillow effects that are coming in and out. What I'm going to do is just go into the dope sheet and select that twist and make it a linear rather than an ease in, ease out, just so that we've just got a kind of constant movement rather than just that rotation in the middle. Okay, so I'll hide that, and then I'll add in another effector, which is the bulge effector. If I can find it, there we go. And this one again, I'm going to add it under the A, and we're going to say fit to parent. Bring it back out again. And this one I'm going to set it so, I mean, this is where you can have a play basically, but I'm going to set the first and last keyframe to be 0, and then frame 50, our middle frame, I might change this to 20 for instance. So then over the course of our 100 frames you should be bulging in and out. Okay, the last frame needs to be reset. Okay, let's set that. There you go. So we've got our bulging in and out, and you could do that through you could rotate that as well, possibly, to add on some sort of like secondary motion. But you can then add on additional effectors. I think I also added on spherify. Go to spherify. I'm going to put that under the A. Fit to parent. It's pretty crazy. We'll just change the strength on that, something like 5%. You can see it with and without, which it doesn't seem to be that much of a difference, but over the course of time, all these additional little effectors that you add up, they kind of add kind of these different elements to the animation. So I'm just going to maybe put that to 10, make sure that, that's back at 5. So then we have all three of those effectors working together along with the MoExtrude animation. Okay, so now we've got the animation done basically, and we could go into Octane and set this up for rendering. Okay, so here we are with the Octane live viewer open on one side, and actually the first thing I'm going to do is just set this up so that we're kind of at a more like Instagram accessible size, so 1000 by 1250, and then I can reset this. My camera, I've currently got a depth of field on, so I think I'm going to turn that off, and then we can talk about putting that on afterwards. Okay, so let's zoom in and have a look at what we've got. So we've got our A, we've got these effectors on there, or deformers, which I'm just going to hide so we don't see them in camera. The only thing I've added to the scene is I've got this kind of scoop perspective view. It's just a scoop kind of studio setup. On here I think I actually need to extend it a little bit so you can see it's just a spline. It's been extruded, so I'm just going to select the top point and just pull that up just to give us a bit more of a scene. Okay, right, so we're going to add in a couple of materials. I'm going to do some very simple materials. First I'm going to add in glossy, and this is going to be for the background to create that blue. Just using the tool here, I'm going to change this to something like 211, 39. I'm reading off the numbers for the material I created. Okay, and 83. I'm going to drag that onto our studio. Right, and it's quite glossy, so I'm just going to take the roughness of that up just a little bit. Actually, I'm going to put this up to something like 0.2. Okay, and then we're going to create another material, which is going to be the yellow that we're going to put on our A. And for that one, the colours I set were 35 and then 100 and 100. So it's quite a solid colour. Add that on. Okay, so there's our A and there's our blue scene. So the next thing we need is to bring in here some sort of something reflective. We'll bring in a HDRI environment, and I have set in my scene this HDRI from the Pixel Lab, which I like using. Okay, I might turn this up a little bit, and then what I'm going to do is add in a couple of lights. So let's bring in a targeted area light. Actually, it's currently targeting at the sky. If you're clicked on something, it will target that. So if you clicked on nothing, you can then select it, and then it will actually create a null. So I'm going to move this light around. That looks nice. Far too big. Okay. I'm going to duplicate that, and I'm going to move that over here. It's really nice when you've got the targeted area lights. Now this actually looks quite dark. That's because we're currently using direct lighting. We want to use path tracing. You can kind of quickly change it just by selecting up here. So already we're getting this really nice sort of look. I'm going to change this camera slightly. Now it's kind of being filled in the center a bit, and I think that's basically the noise that we're using in this shader. I think I need to get different seed. So there you go. So we can at least see the hole in the middle of the A. So it's a bit more obvious that that's an A. Okay, and I'm going to add some roughness onto the material of the A. And I'm going to do that by going into the node editor. I'm going to add an image texture. And I'm going to pump that into the roughness channel. And I have this roughness texture that you could add in. I mean, you just search on Google, you can probably find loads of them. So I'm just pumping that into there, adding that in. That just kind of gives us a bit more variation in the shininess of the A. And that is basically it. When it comes to my actual render setup, I've done a tutorial about my full workflow and about how I set this up and set up speedy rendering so you get nice clean renders. If you're taking part in 36 days of type, good luck, and I'll be looking out for your renders, and hopefully you can see mine as well. I hope this was useful and that it's something that you might use within the next 36 days and beyond. But that's all for now. Until the next time, thank you. Bye.